Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. And welcome to Monday's edition of the Doctor Who Daily. Your TARDIS team as a showrunner is very important. If people end up not liking your companion or companions, then you don't have a Doctor Who show. Now, since the show's come back, we've had some very interesting TARDIS teams and companion story. But I think because the revival's been back now, because Doctor Who's been back now for 17 years, they've kind of begun to repeat themselves with the companions, where we've always had modern day companions and mostly young, attractive females. Now, a lot of people are not happy with the choice of companion for Russell T Davies' new era. I think she's one of the best actors in the industry today. And in terms of the actor, I'm very excited about her casting. Disappointed that she's going to be a contemporary companion and a contemporary character. I write a lot of Doctor Who fan fiction. I love it. And of course, if you're going to write Doctor Who fan fiction, in your imagination, you're the Doctor. I'm always the Doctor in my fan fiction. And I've come up with some very interesting TARDIS teams. I've had the Doctor recently my Doctor travel with a shielder as they chase Clara through the cosmos and try and force her to accept that she has to return to her death. We've discussed that before. My number one TARDIS team is a mother and a daughter from the future. Basically, the Doctor arrives on this planet in the future, and the mother has an incurable cosmic illness. And the Doctor makes an impossible promise that he hopes, within them traveling with him, they can find a cure somewhere in space and time for this woman. So the little girl wants the Doctor desperately to find a cure for her mother. But her mother wants the Doctor to promise that after she's gone, he will raise the child. So the Doctor, my Doctor, is put in a very, very uncomfortable position by two different characters that want two different things from him. The mother wanting the Doctor to raise a child is very difficult for the Doctor because he doesn't really want that responsibility. And does that mean that he would have to stop traveling? So for me, it's a very interesting demographic. It's a very interesting dynamic between the Doctor, the mother, and the child. I think I'm quite kind of sad that the Doctor in contemporary New Who has never travelled with a child before, because I think it would attract lots of kids to the show as well. And I think it would be very, very interesting. But your TARDIS team is very, very important. Now, in Classic Who, I believe we've had some really good TARDIS teams and some really mundane TARDIS teams. I think the revival, I think the Chibnall era didn't really develop their companions. So it's not really the characters' faults or the actors' fault. But I don't think Chibnall did a really good job of developing vibrant companions. And that's a shame. So, I mean, I've even had this other idea. Yesterday I was watching Planet of the Dead and I thought, wouldn't it be amazing to have Malcolm, aka Lee Evans, the stand-up comedian, and Lady D'Souza and the Doctor travelling in the TARDIS together? But instead of the Doctor and Lady D'Souza having this relationship, this romance, wouldn't it be fun if Malcolm has this kind of crush on the Lady D'Souza and ultimately they end up falling in love and after a while go off and do their own thing and live their own lives? I think it would be amazing to have Malcolm and the Lady D'Souza travelling with the Doctor. And it's interesting things like that that get people interested. But ultimately, I have my wish list of companions is future different planets. And I know that RTD believes this strongly. In fact, all the people who have run Doctor Who since it's come back believe it has to be a contemporary companion and the companion has to be you or me on the TARDIS asking the right questions. And I understand that premise, but as we've discussed before, because that premise has been done to death, I think people are so hungry for something different. And people are desperate for this brand new character, Ruby Sunday, not to be another kind of companion that has a crush on the Doctor, or that the Doctor and the companion are having a love affair or something like this. It's been done. It's clear the audience don't want that. Also, modern day people in entertainment talk about representation and inclusion. Russell T Davies is a gay man. And I think that Ncuti Gatwa is also a gay man. So it would have been a very interesting thing to have another male on the TARDIS and maybe, you know, twist the romance between the companion and the Doctor and make it maybe a gay romance or something like that. And I know a lot of people would be triggered by that, but who cares about that? It could be very, very interesting because you can't keep on talking about representation and inclusion when you're not actually doing it. But we know that Russell's very careful about what he does. The success of the show is number one for Russell T Davies. He's a genius, and that's why the show was so successful, because there's certain things he hasn't done, although we've seen Captain Jack and the Doctor kiss on the lips. So there's been some interesting things there. But I do think in this day and age where we are today, there is a fragile environment. And I don't think people are going to tolerate an attractive, young, vibrant Doctor and an attractive young companion having another romance. It's not what the audience want. Now, I'm not saying you always have to, you know, adhere to fan demand. It's good if you can do it, but you shouldn't always bend the knee. And I agree with that as a creative and a writer of stories myself. But I think when you know the audience don't want something, it's probably for the best if you don't do it. People are making the assumption that the Doctor and Ruby Sunday will have a romance because Russell T Davies has done it before. And, you know, everyone's calling Ruby Sunday another Rose, but of course we don't know that. And hopefully that's not the case because we've done Rose, she's been there, we want something new, and hopefully Ruby is a very new, more different companion. But it's clear she's going to be contemporary. I can't see how different she's going to be to anything we've seen before. But it's been proven that the young female companion has worked for the modern contemporary show. But as someone who writes Doctor Who stories, I do like to do interesting things, you know, because I'm not writing for the television. I'm writing, you know, when you do Doctor Who fan fiction, you're doing it for yourself. And the kind of TARDIS teams I've told you I would like and that I've done and are thinking of doing are very different, because the whole point, like the one with the mother and the child, that is going to expand. So the Doctor will fail to find a cure for the mother's incurable illness. Ultimately, the mother will die and the child will end up blaming the Doctor. And the child will betray the Doctor and join the Master in doing something absolutely terrible. And ultimately the Doctor, let me rephrase that, the Master and the child will actually trap the Doctor in the Genesis arc. So that would happen in a season finale. And the Genesis arc is something that can drive you absolutely insane. And it's basically Time Lord technology, and you know, it would absolutely drive you balmy if you were stuck in there, which is exactly what I'm planning for it to do to my Doctor. So that's my kind of plan. As I say, there's some very interesting things that you can do with a TARDIS team. And I think at this stage of a 17-year-old plus revival, you do have to think of different things. Yes, the companion can still ask questions, but you can do some very, very interesting concepts with your TARDIS team. I haven't always been sold that a companion has to travel with the Doctor. We saw it in Midnight and the Waters of Mars, where the Doctor meeting new characters without a companion already with him does work. And it works really well. It's just the Doctor would be on on their own on the TARDIS. I know most people wouldn't agree with that. We've already seen examples, Russell's tried to give examples why the Doctor needs to travel with someone. Now, obviously, he's putting those things within the story, that if maybe Donna was with him in the waters of Mars, he wouldn't have gone so insane and done what he did. And I get that, but that's basically Russell writing that within the story. So I've not always been sold that a companion is utterly important in Doctor Who stories, and that ultimately when he lands on a planet, on a time, in a moment in history, he's going to meet new people anyway. I mean, someone else I would have loved for the Doctor to travel with would have been Linda with a Y, who he met in Parting of the Ways and Bad Wolf. But basically, Eve Miles's character would have been amazing to travel with as well from The Unquiet Dead. That just would have been amazing because she was a very charming character. Obviously, they killed her off. So there's been lots of potential where the Doctor in the revival could have travelled with a lot more interesting people, and you could have done a lot more interesting things. The reason I like the idea of Eve Miles Gwyneth from The Unquiet Dead travelling with the Doctor, because she's a more innocent character. She's from the past with a different mentality, and I like that element of her. She was very sweet and nice, and I think a character as innocent as that would just evolve and change a little bit as the show went on, as her experience of travelling with the Doctor would go on. I think we are desperate for something hugely different with the TARDIS team now. I have to give it to Moffat. Amy and Rory were a very, very different TARDIS team. Although Amy was a young, attractive young woman, bringing on Rory along for the ride was a very interesting dynamic. And there were clashes between the Doctor and Rory. And they were very interesting clashes as well. Because ultimately, in the early days, and Rory's suspicions of the Doctor that he's dangerous were right. In fact, Rory was right about the Doctor. Ultimately, what happens to Amy and Rory because of their time with the Doctor, that Rory ends up, because of the Weeping Angels, in the past. So in the present day, he's already dead, and Amy makes the devastating decision, the right decision, to join him. Because ultimately, it's a great story by Moffat. At first, Amy takes Rory terribly for granted, but it's only when she's giving her attentions to the Doctor, and the Doctor doesn't like these attentions, and he's trying to show her how much she actually loves Rory, and ultimately she makes that sacrifice because in the end she realised that she did love Rory. So that was a very interesting, different TARDIS dynamic. Ultimately he went with a typical kind of TARDIS team with Clara Oswald, although she was very different because she was a mystery box. But yeah, I think at this stage they have to try new things. It's clear with what's going on with the new Doctor Who we're getting. Even if Ruby Sunday isn't kind of a repeat of Rose, ultimately she's a young, modern day, contemporary companion, yada, yada, yada. It's basically the same thing as we've already seen. Now, most people will say to me, well, Mick, if it isn't broke, why do you need to fix it? I don't think it necessarily needs fixing. I think what you need from a TARDIS team going forward, in my opinion, is something a bit different. And I would like to see someone from a different planet, someone historical, someone from the future. I just think it's different and it's interesting because we've done it to death. And something else. Now, Russell strongly believes that he doesn't like the idea of the companion just travelling with the Doctor and never going home. And I think that element worked with Rose for sure, where she would go back to Jackie and Mickey, and there'll be this whole thing when they thought she was dead after being gone for a year. And that was very interesting. And again, part of the consequences that RTD shows of travelling with the Doctor. But again, that's been done. I would like to see a companion who's got such a shit life in the world that they live in, and the Doctor takes them away from that, but they don't come back home until it's time for them to leave the TARDIS for good. So they've evolved and they've gone back, and now they can live in this shitty real world. I like that element as well. And so I think we do need different, more experimental companions on the TARDIS. And I think they'll probably get away with it. I think Ruby Sunday will be great because of Russell's writing and the excellent actor who's going to be playing her. But I think going forward from Ruby Sunday, they really need to look for something a little bit different. This has been the Doctor Who Daily here on Movies TV Mad with me, Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss this beautiful perfection. And I'll see you in the next video. Until I see you again, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.